Okay, welcome again. Awesome morning, awesome time to come back. And man, we're just we're coming to the end, man. It's again, it blows my mind how quickly we've gotten here, but how much we've been able to learn and explore as well. And so we left off yesterday. We're on the bottom of page 232 in the book. And I know Rhonda will give us our
Should be 248 if it's two, I have to make sure.
248.
247.
247. Okay. The very bottom of that page. So 247 in the PDF, 232 in the book. We were talking about wisdom, and the devil was saying how time, yields wisdom. But he was also pointing out that that's only for non-drifters. that if someone is a drifter, that they don't necessarily get the benefit of finding wisdom just over time. And so we pick up on this last question here, where he says, from what you say, I infer that time is the friend of the person who trains his mind to follow positive thought habits and the enemy of the person who drifts into negative thought habits. Is that correct? That's precisely true. All people can be classified as drifters and non-drifters. Drifters are always at the mercy of the non-drifters, and time makes this relationship permanent. So again, he's talking about time in terms of this hypnotic rhythm and how staying in the same habits, it makes it permanent, what we allow in our life. And Hill says, do you mean that if I drift along through life without definite aim or purpose, the non-drifter may become my master, and time only serves to give the non-drifter a stronger and more permanent grip on me? And the devil says that's stating it true. One area that we can see this in is, is somebody working in a job, and this is not bashing people with jobs. It's just, if that's not your calling, if that's not where you're supposed to be, you're not supposed to be there. It's cumbersome, it's toilsome, it's not, getting you closer to any of your financial goals. You're basically stuck in a position. And there are a lot of people that just go to work because they pay bills and they can't stand what they do. And this is really what the devil is kind of referencing here, is that these are the types of behaviors or habits that we can find ourselves in. And people, they just move from job to job, even though it's nothing that's fulfilling to them. It's nothing that uses any of their gifts. And so to continue to do that, we find ourselves in a position where I'm at the mercy of the paycheck. I'm at the mercy of the boss who decides whether they'll keep me or not, of the company, of whether my job is relevant or not. I become at the mercy of those people. And so this is what these are the kinds of situations that we see here. And so Hill dropping down after Sharon Lecter's note, Hill says, well, what is wisdom? Okay. Wisdom is the ability to relate yourself to nature's laws so as to make them serve you, and the ability to relate yourself to other people so as to gain their harmonious, willing cooperation in helping you make life yield whatever you demand of it. So he's saying a person is wise when they understand how to utilize the laws that are already in operation, the natural laws, even we'd say the spiritual laws that are in operation, knowing how to see those, understand those, use those, and then to be able to get cooperation of those around you. And he says, relating yourself to other people, of garnering relationships that push everybody forward. That's wisdom, he says. And so Hill points out that that's different than accumulated knowledge. He says accumulated knowledge isn't wisdom. And the devil says, great heavens. So interesting. The devil says, great heavens, right? Great heavens, no. If knowledge were wisdom, the achievements of science would not have been converted into implements of destruction. So he says people can have knowledge all day long, but that does not mean they have the wisdom to use that knowledge properly. And that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. So he says, no, people, knowledge is not wisdom. They can turn that into something very destructive. And so Hill says, well, then what is needed? If I have knowledge and I want to convert that to wisdom, what's needed? And he says, time plus the desire for wisdom. Oops, forgot to put on do not disturb. He says, time plus the desire for wisdom. Y'all know, have you ever seen people sometimes who they want to get all the information and want to get all the information, yet that information does nothing for them except it sits as information. They don't ever use it. Right? They don't ever really use it. And so he's saying that you have to have a desire for wisdom. I think people would say that they have a desire, but you got to double check and make sure, do I really desire the proper use of this information? Right? Do I really desire wisdom? Because sometimes the answer to or wisdom will tell you to do something you may not want to do with that knowledge, right? So the devil is saying, if you want to take knowledge and turn that into wisdom or wise use of the information that you're getting, then you need to have time and you need to be willing to seek to seek wisdom. It says, wisdom is never thrust upon one. It is acquired, if at all, by positive thinking through voluntary effort. He says, wisdom is a voluntary thing. You have to get in there and decide that I want to use wisdom with this knowledge. I had a lady one time I was, doing an appointment with, and I'll never forget this because it just totally floored me. And she was just talking about, she really took a lot of pride in how many scriptures she could quote. And we were going over information about investing. And I was talking about the rule of 72. And she says, she starts quoting the scripture of in all that getting, get understanding. And now she used that in a way that says, no, this is totally against anything I would ever do. It doesn't make sense to say. I mean, like, she just went on this whole rail of how everything that we were talking about doing at that time, which was saving for retirement, was completely unwise. Okay. Now, I just didn't know what to say after that. I kind of packed up and left. The fact that you want to say that you pride yourself in wisdom, yet you think living paycheck to paycheck is the best way for you to live financially sound, and never save for, she didn't have emergency fund, she had nothing. Yet this is, so what I say, I said that to say, when the devil talked about voluntary effort, that again, this is why these kinds of books and this seeking is so important, because I need to be able to see myself and make sure that I'm not blind to my own ways and my own biases and things like that. That's seeking. Means I don't know everything, right? And we have to be open to what, especially in times where we have seen God has established and constantly given us word around doing something different. He is doing something different. And so we have to be willing and open to accept that. And that is part of wisdom as well. The knowledge that he's given us so far, he may want to use that in a different way. He might want to show you something different to do. So the devil says wisdom is a voluntary effort to be open. And Hill says, is it safe for all people to have knowledge? Would somebody put in the chat for me the page numbers we're on and everything as well, just in case people join a little bit later. We're on page 234 in the book. But he says, is it safe for all people to have knowledge? It's never safe for anyone to have extensive knowledge without wisdom. He's like, that's just dangerous. If you can get all the information and not have the wisdom behind it. And so Hill says, well, what is the age at which most people acquire wisdom or begin to acquire wisdom? And now here, this is interesting because he says 40. So the devil says the majority of people who acquire wisdom do so after they have passed the age of 40. Prior to that time, the majority of people are too busy gathering knowledge and organizing it into plans to spend any effort seeking wisdom. How many of us can relate to that? Anybody over 40 in here? Right? I definitely can, because I look at myself now and I look at myself back, especially when I started business, and you just have so much information, you just have so much energy, and you're just trying to absorb, and you absorb and go, right? Let me learn this and do it, learn this and do it, learn this and do it. And the older that I got, I do realize, and I kind of think about it in the ways where, some people say the younger folks, they have the energy to do it. I don't, when I get older, I don't have the energy, to do it that way. But I think some of it is we've learned lessons at this point that now not so quick to jump the gun anymore. You're just now taking more of that information in and now ciphering it through the wisdom that you've learned up until this point. So he says, up until that point, everybody's just running around. They're just trying to get all the information, trying to figure it all out, make their plans, and really don't stop to think about the wisdom side of it. And so Hill says, well, what circumstance of life is most apt to lead one to acquire wisdom? And here we go again. What leads to most people to wisdom? Adversity and failure. He says, adversity and failure. When things get tough, he's like, that's the place you can pull wisdom out of. When it looks like you've been defeated, that's the place you can pull wisdom out of. He says, these are nature's universal languages through which she imparts wisdom to those who are ready to receive it. And again, we're talking about this voluntary effort, this time in my life in which I have hit a stumbling block. And I can either say, oh, this isn't for me because of this, because somebody said no, because of whatever. I can hit that adversity. Or he says, if I'm actually ready to receive wisdom, I can look at what just happened and said, okay, how can I do things differently? How do I apply this lesson? And Hill says, does adversity and failure always bring wisdom? No, only to those who are ready for wisdom and have voluntarily sought it. And what determines one's readiness? Hill asks. Time and the nature of one's thought habits. So the devil's like, being able to take the time. Number one, you have to have gone through these things, right? And then you have to allow that. You have to change. You can't be in a negative. If you have a negative thought habit, then looking at adversity is not going to bring you any kind of benefit, because this is what he's saying. A negative pattern is actually not open to receive wisdom, because all you see is how you were the victim, or what the circumstances were that were stacked up against you, or how this wasn't fair, that wasn't fair. The negative mindset won't be able to see it. And Hill says, well, what about newly acquired knowledge? Is that the same as time-tested knowledge? No, knowledge tested through the lapse of time always is superior to that which has been newly acquired. Time gives to knowledge definiteness in both quality and quantity and dependability. One never can be sure of knowledge that has not been tested. So, that kind of makes sense to itself. It's like you need to make sure that whatever you're learning, there's been some kind of track record there. And so Hill says, what is dependable knowledge? It is knowledge which harmonizes with natural law, which means that it is based upon positive thought. Dependable knowledge is based on positive thought. I often say to people, this is just something I guess I've learned over time, but don't ever make permanent decisions based on temporary circumstances. And what I mean by that is, if there's something going on in your life, the devil's kicking up dust around you, whatever it may be, don't sit up there and decide to change your whole life based upon this one circumstance. Don't say, oh, I need to go a totally opposite direction because this right here is temporary. Don't do something that's going to change the trajectory of your life when it's only a temporary circumstance. And so I say that to relate that to this power of positive thought versus negative thought, that a lot of times if we are in a negative thought pattern, then we're going to see situations, we receive knowledge in this negative way. And what the devil is saying here is, you cannot base your decisions based on the negativity around the circumstance. You can't, you see when people make decisions because they're afraid. That's not wisdom when it's fear. Okay. This is what he's saying here. You cannot, the best knowledge is that which is using the laws of nature, using the spiritual laws, and those things are in themselves positive. So when I'm receiving information, he says the only information you can depend on have its roots in the positive. This is why the Bible tells us, what are you supposed to think on? Think on these things, right? What's good? What's a benefit to you? What's lovely? That's what he's saying. The dependable stuff is rooted in the positive stuff. Okay. The information I can use to make decisions on. Don't make decisions on negative information. Okay. Don't make decisions off of negative information. Right. Okay. And he says, does time modify and alter the values of knowledge? Yes, time modifies and alters all values. That which is accurate knowledge today may become null and void tomorrow because of time's rearrangement of facts and values. Time modifies all human relationships for better or worse, depending upon the policy through which people relate themselves to one another. In the realm of thought, there is a time when it is proper to sow the seeds of thought, and there is a proper time to reap the harvest of those thoughts. The same as there is in the time to sow and a time to reap from the soil of the earth. Without the proper measurement of time between the sowing and reaping, nature modifies or withholds the rewards of the sowing. This is important here. Okay. First of all, he says that knowledge can only be, some knowledge can only be based on what has been time and tested up to that point, that things change. Take, for instance, phone calls. It used to be that people had to answer the phone because there was no caller ID, and you could build a business around those phone calls. And this is what you knew, but you had more people answering the phone. Well, now you got caller ID. Now you got to switch up what might have to take place or how many phone calls you might have to make because people screen. Right. So it's just that something like that, those little pieces of knowledge, he says they can change over time because things do change. But he says, what is pretty constant though, is this law of sowing and reaping. And you have to be mindful. And this is where a lot of people get hung up in the sowing and the reaping, because he says right here, without proper measurement of time between the sowing and the reaping, nature modifies or withholds the rewards of the sowing, meaning that there are some seeds that you plant, you can see a very quick result. There are some seeds that you're going to plant that it's going to take a while for you to see the result. And you must be okay and understand that there is a different measurement of time and be willing to still be there when the harvest is ready. Right? Y'all have heard me say this before in past calls that, the scripture says that Jesus said the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. Right? And, when I first saw that, I said, the workers are few because the workers quit. The workers quit. They went and planted and they got tired of waiting and they quit. Okay. So there's plenty of harvest. We just can't quit before the harvest time has come. And so the devil, this is, y'all, it's a very simple principle. People would think, well, if I put something in the ground, I'm going to wait and expect it. But you'd be amazed at how many people, especially in business, plant seeds and walk away because they thought that seed was supposed to shoot up overnight. And they get impatient and quit. And what happens? Another harvester comes in to harvest the seed they planted. It happens all the time. All the time. And guess what? It's going to happen to you. You're going to harvest somebody's seed who quit. But guess what else? The Bible says that too. He says that too. That's a promise for us believers. He says you're going to have houses you didn't build. You're going to have wells you didn't dig. Right? So we know, and the devil, this is what he's talking about. Remember the difference between the drifters and the non-drifters. Those drifters plant and leave. Non-drifters get to come in and pull up the harvest. Right? So this is what he's pointing out here. And so Hill says, okay, we've talked about that. Now let's go to the last two of the 7 principles. So remember, we're talking about those 7 things that can help you escape this grip of law of hypnotic rhythm on the negative end to now the positive end. And he says the next principle is harmony. Okay, harmony. Now, he says throughout nature, one may find evidences that all all natural law moves in an orderly manner through the law of harmony. Through the operation of this law, nature forces everything within the range of a given environment to become harmoniously related. Understand this truth and you will catch a new and more intriguing vision of the power of environment. You will understand why association with negative minds is fatal to those seeking self-determination. So it's harmony. This is the next thing. And this really goes back to environment. What he's saying here is nature forces everything in a given environment to become harmoniously related. And, as we saw in previous chapters, this is why you don't see palm trees in Antarctica. Okay, nature has a way of dividing out. There are certain things that thrive in certain environments, and they are only going to be found there. You take them and you put them somewhere else. Nature says, you don't belong here, and it's going to die. It's not going to prosper. Okay, man, what a great example in nature. You don't belong here. You don't belong here. And that's why some of you, when you are in certain jobs, you've taken on certain jobs, you've taken on certain, things of that nature, and you find yourself, you don't feel right. You don't feel like you belong. You feel kind of like the misfit, the outcast. You feel like it almost hurts you to be in that environment. Pay attention, because nature is trying to tell you that's not your place. That's not your place. But you have to be willing to hear that and understand that. Right? So, and so the devil is saying, this is why this harmony is why it's so important that you be around the right kind of people, that the negative mindset is so detrimental to someone who's trying to stay in authority over their life. And Hill says, so do you mean that nature voluntarily forces human beings to harmonize with the influences of their environment? Yes, that's true. Hypnotic rhythm forces upon every living thing the dominating influences. Y'all see, when again, if you find yourself in an environment, let's again just talk jobs because that's the easiest thing. I find myself in an environment I don't agree with, I don't feel comfortable in, I feel like I don't belong there. But see, some people will not take themselves out of the environment. They'll stay there until they get so numb to not feeling like they belong that all of a sudden they start to feel like they belong. They become numb. They basically bow down to that feeling and just say, oh, well, and stay there. And then it becomes law for their life. And this is what the devil's talking about. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces upon every living thing the dominating influences of the environment in which it exists. It says, and Hill says, if nature forces human beings to take on the nature of the environment in which they live, what means of escape are available to people who find themselves in environments of poverty and failure, but desire to escape? So I see myself somewhere I don't want to be. He says they must change their environment or remain poverty stricken. Nature permits no one to escape the influences of his environment. He's like, you can't stay there and escape at the same time. You have to decide that you got to get out, and you must remove yourself. You must remove yourself. However, it says nature in her abundance of wisdom has given every normal human being the privilege of establishing his own mental, spiritual, and physical environment. But once he establishes it, he must become a part of it. That is the inexorable law of the working of the law of harmony. So what he's saying is this: you may find yourself in a situation or an environment, a family, a job in which you are not harmonizing and you desire to get out. And he says, there may be this moment in which in your mind, you need to be somewhere else. In your spirit, you need to be somewhere else. And you can grow and cultivate these things inside of you for a period of time. But he's saying, but once that is established here, you're going to have to remove yourself physically as well. Right? You're going to have to. So there may be a period in which you're working towards getting out. That's people who, let's say they come into business on a part-time basis, right? Because they're working their way out of the environment and the circumstance that they're in. But there comes a time where they have to make a choice, right? They have to remove themselves. And then he begins to address business. So Hill says, in a business association, for example, who establishes the dominating influence that determines the rhythm of the environment? Who sets the pace for the environment? And he says the individual or individuals who think and act with definiteness of purpose. So now we see people in business, okay, not always establishing the right rhythm. Okay, that doesn't mean they're not acting with definiteness of purpose. Their purpose just may not be equally yoked with yours. Okay, so understand that they're saying this person, they can still set a tone, even if that tone, that rhythm, you may not necessarily be in the same, in the same rhythm. And Hill says, well, is it that simple? And the devil says, yes, definite of purpose is the starting point from which an individual may establish his own environment. So remember, that's where you begin. Definiteness of purpose. Definiteness of purpose. What am I here for? What is my eye set on? And stay focused on that. Now, Hill brings up a question here. He says, I'm missing something because the world is torn with warfare, business depressions, other forms of strife, and which represent about everything except harmony. Nature does not seem to be forcing people to harmonize with one another. How do you explain this inconsistency? All right, well, the devil says, we drop down past the note, there is no inconsistency. The dominating influence of the world are, as you say, negative. Very well. Nature is forcing human beings to harmonize with the dominating influences of the world environment. So he's saying negative. This next sentence here says manifestations of harmony may be either positive or negative. Okay. So he's like, even though we think of harmony as a good thing, he's saying harmony can also be used in the negative context as well. Think about gangs, right? I mean, those all think along the same level. They hang out, doing all the same kind of things, but that's a negative connotation. They are harmonizing with each other though, right? And so he gives an example here. He says, for example, a group of men in prison may, and they generally do, think and act in a negative manner. But nature sees to it that the dominating influence of the prison is impressed upon every individual in it. A group of poverty-stricken people in a tenement house may fight among themselves and apparently resist all forms of harmony, but nature forces each of them to become a part of the dominating influence of the house in which they live. So he's saying the harmony is not necessarily because you and I get along, A, B, and C get along, but it's the fact that we all think the same way. And therefore, we stay in the same kind of environment, because ultimately our way of thinking is still the same. It may be that I'm supposed to be broke. It may be that somebody's supposed to give me something. It may be that, I was born into this poverty lifestyle and that's my fate. Whatever it may be, or I'm a victim of this or that, or I don't have any skills, or I don't know how to create anything, whatever it is, the same thought pattern. Remember that Hill says, it's the law of hypnotic rhythm is looking for negative or positive. It's not deciphering if it's negative or positive about your marriage, about your other relationships, about your money, or what have you. So the harmony part is just saying all the like-minded people are grouped together. Okay. The people that think the same way are grouped together. And you're going to continue to get the influence of that environment. And he says harmony, in a sense, in the sense it is here used, means that nature relates everything through the universes to every other thing of a similar nature. So everything that belongs together, he's like, they stay together. Negative influences are forced into association with one another, no matter where they may be. Positive influences are just as definitely forced into association with one another. Again, it's kind of how we all got drawn here. It's so interesting how so many people who I had no idea who you were, you had no idea who I was, ended up on a call like this. Through somebody else, some force. But what it was the association was being brought together of like-minded people. That's what's happening. And choosing. We're choosing the environment. And that is a difference here as well. Hill says, I'm beginning to see why successful business leaders are so careful in the choice of their business associates. Men who succeed in any calling usually establish their own environment by surrounding themselves with people who think and act in terms of success. Is that right? The devil says that's the idea exactly. Observe with profit that the one thing all successful men insist upon is harmony among their business associates. Another trait of successful people is that they move with definiteness of purpose and insist upon their associates doing the same. Now, this is really interesting here. What he's saying is, I surround myself with people that think the same way I think, and that's the people I want to be around. But not only do I want to be around those people, he says, but we insist that that means we hold each other accountable. We keep pulling each other up and coming to find you if you get lost, right? That's what he's saying. We insist upon all the associates to do the same thing. And that is key in an environment. Are you not just being around people that think the same, but are you around people that insist that you stay with the flock, that you don't get lost? right? You don't get off track. That's key. Understand these two truths, and you will understand the major difference between a Henry Ford and a day laborer. It's very who they hang around, and does that crowd of people keep you moving in the same direction. And so Sharon Lecter makes a note about this. She says, so the principle of harmony is a benefit to us when we surround ourselves with other successful people. Think of the people you work with. Are they supporting you or holding you back? Right? We have to evaluate the relationships around us. And so Hill says, well, now tell me about the last of the 7 principles. The last principle is caution. Now, this is an interesting one. Okay. Next to the habit of drifting, the most dangerous human trait is the lack of caution. He says people drift into all sorts of hazardous circumstances because they do not exercise caution by planning the moves they make. The drifter always moves without exercising caution. He acts first and thinks later, if at all. He does not choose his friends. He drifts along and allows people to attach themselves to him on their own terms. He does not choose his occupation. So y'all listen, this is a list here. He's saying this is a list here, right? We pay attention. He drifts through school and is glad to get the first job that will give him food and clothing. He invites people to cheat him at trade by neglecting to inform himself of the rules of trade. Okay. He invites illness by neglecting to inform himself of the rules of sound health. He invites poverty by neglecting to protect himself against the environmental influences of the poverty-stricken. He invites failure at every step he takes by neglecting to exercise the caution to observe what causes people to fail. He invites fear in all its forms by his lack of caution in examining the causes of fear. Y'all, listen, that's an interesting sentence here that he says. He says he invites fear because he doesn't take a look at what's causing the fear. He fails in marriage because he neglects to use caution in his choice of a mate. And he uses still less caution in his methods of relating himself to her after marriage. He loses his friends or converts them into enemies by his lack of caution in relating himself to them on the proper basis. So Hill is basically equating the fact that when you aren't careful with everything you're doing, when you are not questioning the habits that you have, that these are the things, that's what he means by lack of caution. Am I adopting a way of life, a way of living, like he talks about, he gets cheated in trade because he doesn't inform himself of the rules of trade, and in earlier chapters, he talked about someone who pays the exorbitant interest, right? Like they go to the payday loan places, they go to the pawn shops rather than getting at least some decent interest rate if they have to take out a loan. He just talks about the things of people that just settle for whatever they need so they can get it quickly without thinking about it. And that's what he's saying is lack of caution. He talks about observing what causes other people to fail. Being able to look at a situation and say, I don't want that. Let me do something different. I remember when I was in corporate America, the day when my father first approached me about the business, I always knew I didn't really fit in corporate America for any length of time. Although, when I first started out, I was young and thought I was going to work my way up one day. Okay. They had different plans, Oh, but okay. But anyway, I remember looking around one day and I was looking at the people who had been at that company for 20 years, 30 years. And I was like, they did not look happy. They did not look happy. They didn't look excited to come to work. Most of them were in bad moods all the time. And that taught me a lesson. It taught me a lesson. I didn't want to do what they had been doing all that time. I didn't want to end up in the same spot. And often we don't take a look at those circumstances, those things around us to learn the lesson. Learn the lesson of someone who says at the end of their career at a certain job, I wish I would have done more. I wish I would have stepped out. I wish I would not have tried to, plan everything the way I thought it should be. I wish I would have. And we can learn those lessons. So he's saying that, and that's caution. And Hill says, are all people lacking in caution? And no, only those who have acquired the habit of drifting. The non-drifter always uses caution. He carefully thinks his plans through before he begins them. He makes allowances for the human frailties of his associates and plans ahead to bridge them. And he gives an example here. He says, if he sends a messenger on an important mission, he sends someone else to make sure the messenger does not neglect his mission. Then he checks on both of them to be sure his wishes have been fulfilled. He takes nothing for granted where caution provides a way to ensure his success. So he's very thorough. The non-drifter is going to make sure what the desired end gets done. And we'll stop here after this set of questions. He says, isn't over caution as detrimental as lack of caution? And the devil says there is no such thing as over caution. What you call over caution is an expression of fear. What you call over caution is an expression of fear. He says fear and caution are two entirely different things. Y'all you have seen this in action. Okay. I have gotten the phone call many a time from somebody who hires in business and then calls me a week later and says, I've been praying and the Lord says this is not for me. Okay, what exactly which part is not for you? And granted, maybe the business side of things, you're not wired that way. That's okay. But what I do know is that God would never tell you, don't get an emergency fund. Don't let your family be protected. God would not tell you to don't save money. So exactly which part, okay, are we talking about here? What we're really talking about is you let fear be your prayer. And the devil said earlier in this book that all prayers are answered. When you pray out of fear, what do you get? The fear result. Okay, so we've all seen this where people want to disguise over caution when it's really just fear. It's really just fear. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and stop right here. We'll drop the mic on that one. And today's what, Wednesday? All right, so we'll pick back up on Thursday. We'll pick back up tomorrow at this part right here. And yeah, we're about finished. Well, you know what? What do y'all think? Do you want to go ahead and finish this part? We'll be finishing this chapter. Where y'all at? Where my peeps at? We good? A few more minutes? Okay. All right, let's go. Okay, let's go ahead and finish this. So he says, don't people mistake fear for overcaution? Yes, that's what we just talked about. Yes, that does happen sometimes. But the majority of people create for themselves far more disastrous hazards by total lack of the habit of caution than by overcaution. So he's saying that, yes, people mistake these things, fear for overcaution. He says, but more people are actually just not cautious at all. They just don't think at all. And they create worse circumstances. And so the Hill says, in what way may caution be used most advantageously in the selection of one's associates and one's method of relating oneself to one's associates? The reason for this is obvious. One's associates constitute the most important part of one's environment, and environmental influences determine whether one forms the habit of drifting or becomes a non-drifter. The person who exercises due caution in the choice of associates never allows himself to be closely associated with any person who does not bring to him through the association some definite mental, spiritual, or economic benefit. He does not associate with anybody that does not give him some form of mental, spiritual, or economic benefit. He's telling you right now how you set up the proper environment for yourself, that your associates, and remember, Hill uses repetition in this book a lot. He's repeating we're hearing some of the same information, but he's using it because, number one, we need to keep hearing it for it to get ingrained. And he's trying to help you see this in a ton of different angles. So it's the facts still remain. The truth is still the truth. And so he says, these associates are the most important thing because they are your environment. And how do you recognize the right kind of associates? They give you some sort of mental, spiritual, or economic benefit. That's how you do it. Okay. That's how you do it. That's how you determine. Right. And then Hill says, well, isn't that kind of selfish? And the devil says it is sensible and leads to self-determination. These are the only type of people you can surround yourself with that give you the room and the space and the momentum and the push to be where you need to be. They're the only kind of people that do that. Why spend time with anybody else? Why are you trying to move forward when somebody else is pulling you back? What kind of progress can you make that way? You can't. He says, it is the desire of every normal person to find material success and happiness. Nothing contributes more to one's success and happiness than careful chosen associates. Caution in the selection of associates becomes, therefore, the duty of every person who wishes to become happy and successful. So he says, remember, we talked about just a few pages before that the only person you owe anything to is you. There's no duty between you and anybody else that is so high that it should override your ability, your environment to be happy. There's nobody worth that for you, worth that cost for you. So he says, the duty of every person who wants to become happy and successful is that you will be cautious with the people you hang out with. The drifter allows his closest associates to attach themselves to him on their own terms. That means people become attached and ingrained and intertwined in your life, and they get from you whatever they want to get from you whenever they want to get from you. Those people, you think of them now, they're draining on you. They are drains on you. They come to you with only a need, never a solution. And they just pull. The non-drifter carefully selects his associates and allows no one to become closely associated with him unless that person contributes some form of helpful influence or bestows some definite benefit. So unless you're contributing, unless you are some kind of creator with me, you must create with me, then we do not belong together. Okay, it is what it is. It is what it is. It never occurred to me that caution in the selection of friends had so definite a bearing on one's success or failure. Do all successful people exercise caution in the selection of all their associates, whether in business, social, or professional relationships? And the devil says, without the exercise of caution in the choice of all associates, no one may be certain of success in any calling. On the other hand, lack of exercise of caution brings almost certain defeat. in whatever one undertakes. When you are not cautious, he says, it's certain that you will not meet success. All right. And Sharon Lecter makes a note here as we finish this chapter. Do you have a hard time saying no to people? This chapter makes you realize that using caution in selecting your associates and learning to say no more often may speed you on your path to success. And that's, again, sometimes that's part of a behavior that we have in thinking we owe something to somebody. I don't want to let somebody down. I want you. So, and those are all those kind of traits that make people attach themselves to you, which are not beneficial to you. You're beneficial to them, right? But it's not getting you where you need to be going. So yeah, man, y'all, woo, we made it. Almost. Almost. There's a lot in that today, but we have finished up the 7 principles. So basically we are down to the end of this book. We've got a summary, and if you have there's the summary, there's the afterword, there's the reflection, but then there's also a secret chapter. Okay. There's a secret chapter, which is very interesting as well. And so that's why I say it's going to take us it may be another week and a half or so to finish up all of this, including the secret chapter. But man, what a ride. What a ride we've been on so far. And I hope that you all have gotten, and I very well believe that everybody has gotten something new from reading this, and been able to solidify and change some of their own habits and maybe our ways of thinking, be able to look ourselves in the mirror and see what it is that needs to shift and change so that we get to this next level. And it's important, like I said to y'all before, man, God has us on a specific path, a specific trajectory in which he's giving us certain things at certain times. And this book was very timely, I think, because it was being used to point out certain areas so that we're ready to receive all the new things and ready to hold all it is that his word is producing in our life, because it is manifesting as we speak. And so we have to be able to hold that thing. And man, so I'm excited. I'm excited about what he's shown us, and we've got more to come. So amen. Anybody want to add anything before we get off of here? Steph, I've seen you just been so giddy the whole time. It's so awesome to watch. Amen. All righty. Anybody? I know we're running right on time here. Anyone want to add anything before we hop off?
I'm about to scream, pop, bus, whatever it is.
Yeah.
First of all, good morning, fam tribe.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that really stood out to me when we were talking about, principles, and again, I put it in the chat. If a principle is applicable anywhere, it is applicable everywhere. We just have to look for the lesson so we can get that lesson, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were talking about negative environments. One of the things is that people who dwell in a negative environment, for them, that's their norm.
Mm-hmm.
And your presence, when you get there, is an aggravation to them.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you know who you are and why you're there.
Right.
If God sends us somewhere, it is either to set a standard and raise the bar, or establish a standard and raise that standard for God to judge.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that as you're continuing on to your next destination. And what's really hysterical is that negative people will call you negative.
True.
So like you said in the book, the challenge is if you stay in there, you will become negative, and therefore their prophecy will be true simply because you stayed where you should not have remained.
Mm-hmm.
And so Let us always be reminded that we should never mistake, you know, where he has sent us to for where he is keeping us. Like some
Right.
things he's sending us to go through it.
Right.
And let's just always ask him first. You know,
Mhm.
why, like you said, why am I here?
Mhm.
What am I to contribute? What am I to receive? Am I just in this to look and see what's going on and come back and give the intel? Because we see in the word of precedent for that. Sometimes you're sent into an environment just to observe what's going on and come back to your mastermind group
Mhm.
and talk about what that is, right?
Mhm.
So I'm just really thrilled for us that we're coming through this with one mind, one heart, one beat, one sound.
Yes. Amen. 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 Y'all, I want to again, well, I just want to point out, Matthew, I want to let you know that you've been here 2 days in a row, sir. So you're officially part of the tribe. So hopefully you know that. Okay. This is we call ourselves a tribe. You know, it's like one of those things where everybody says, I found my people, you know, when we come here. So again, I just want to welcome you here. All righty. Anyone else have anything they want to add?
I do. I want to add, woo, when I tell you God's always, man, the conversation I had with my husband last night and just, some things that have been, laying out in this journey, shall I say. But it's so amazing and refreshing to hear God speak. And when I mean he says every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess, because this is what's happening right here.
Mhm.
And the sowing and the reaping and in the environment of nature. And I mean, God has been so intentional around us and how he puts things that happen in our life and situations that we go through, and he puts it right before our eyes each and every day to watch and see what it is. So sometimes I'm like, how is it that I can get impatient when I understand that I've sown some seeds?
Mhm.
Not a little bit. I sow seeds each and every day. And then there's times that when that reaping and that harvesting and all, it takes time. And I mean, when we look at nature around us, when seasons are changing, we're also in seasons and we're also changing. And that's so beautiful, because I remember back then, I remember when I used to, and I had no idea why I was asking about shifting, asking God to shift my circles and the people I were around. One, I just felt like I started in Prime America, just watching some of the leaders and everything. I felt like just from what was out there that I was being left behind, and I wanted to kind of understand some of that. So that's where my mental mindset was with like asking for the shifting. But when I say personally, how he has shifted, and you will be amazed at how when you stay, I feel like I wasn't, there's things I was drifting on, but there are some things that were just so intentional because of my mindset of what I knew or felt like I wanted, and that things that I was speaking, how he had shifted me to move in those directions. And then I come here, when I came to this space, and then how this space has cultivated so many different mini circles and spaces with other friendships and connections outside of this, but with like-minded people, it is a blessing. And I mean, if anything that you can take away from what we're talking about here is just stay the course. And I'm just so blessed. And Jacinta, we thank you each and every time just because of your obedience It has shifted and changed so many of us, but yet we're doing the same thing when we step out. And Miss Dunlap, I'm telling you, honey, when I say I go into prayer for you, because I see so much, which I'm sure most of us do, some of those steps that when we were in those situations, Queen, stay the course. Because if you could have heard me probably a year ago, I was you. Okay. And then when I came to this space, Michelle was me. It's just like these journeys. And then when you come back and keep steadfast, somebody else, and you're going to be sitting here listening to the testimonies like, that was me. And that's the beautiful thing about how God uses us. But I love our collective, because I'm telling you also, the relationships, I'm already relational, but I mean, most of you all, when we get to the builder school, when we get time to get apart, when we together, it's a different dynamic. It's like this drawing in, like we can't wait to, it's something, it's so magnetic. But look, I feel like I'm rambling, but man, when I say Holy Spirit's moving,
Amen.
oh, praise God. I'm telling you, God don't play. He don't play.
Yes.
Mirrors
Amen.
open.
Amen.
Right.
Well, y'all listen, again, thank you for that, Lakita. And I'm just excited about where we go next. God is constantly, he gives us these, these whole sessions. He gives us these words. He moves it. Everything is so intentional about what he is doing. And this book is no different. As we get ready to transition from this book, and we'll getting back into our routine of, the different lessons that he takes us. Just wait, man, just wait. It's good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. And if somebody would drop the link to the YouTube replays also in here to the YouTube channel, because I just want to make sure everybody has that to go back. And as we finish up these last couple of chapters, make sure that you do a little bit of refreshers on where we were before we hit the book, because there was some specific words that God had released to us, just starting back from, I don't know, probably beginning of April at least. And there's several different playlists on there. I'd encourage you to take some time to listen to some of those. But we're right on track, man. We are right on track. And I can't wait. And like I said, for those of you guys who you've been in this 90-day prayer blitz with us, the first thing we're going to do is pull a couple of you guys and get some testimonies about where you are right now. Even though we're not totally finished yet, I want to hear how far you've come, because I know that there's already been some things, there's already been some shifts, already some testimonies, and we haven't even made it out yet. And I was even sharing earlier how even from my first prayer blitz, I'm still seeing things happening now. And that was over in May, and so I'm still seeing the effects of what I prayed into, well over 90 days ago. So these testimonies, remember, God is building stamina in us for a reason, and he's teaching us the connection and everything that you look for to manifest physically. Remember that his answer to that was first come into connection with the Holy Spirit in a way you have never done before, because that's step number one. And now what we're seeing out of that, you just hold on to your britches. Okay. All right. But anyway, we love you guys. I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Another great day. So thank you guys for plugging in. We'll see you. Bye.